Hello, I'm doing a movie review, and the movie I want to review is Justice League Dark. Now, Justice League Dark is an animated superhero horror film which was released straight to DVD and Blu-ray in 2017, and the film is based on the DC comics that feature the superhero team known as Justice League Dark, which is essentially the supernatural equivalent of the Justice League. It's a team made up of many of the magical characters from the DC universe. Now, in many of the Justice League Dark comics, the team is led by John Constantine. Now, I'll admit, I've only read a little bit of the Constantine comics, but the best way I can describe this character is, essentially, he's a paranormal investigator slash exorcist, and he's also sort of a sorcerer as well, because he does practice black magic, and he's a demon hunter, which I guess would tie into being an exorcist. Now, the character was actually created by Alan Moore and Stephen Bissette, and he originated in Alan Moore's run on Swamp Thing. The character was later spun off into his own comic book series, Hellblazer, and as time went on, the character would appear in other comic books and graphic novels from DC, like Neil Gaiman's The Books of Magic, and I think he also appeared in the Lucifer comics as well. Now, the Hellblazer comics were adapted into the 2005 film Constantine with Keanu Reeves. Now, even though I've only read a little bit of the Hellblazer comics, I can still easily say that that movie had next to nothing to do with the comic books. Now, personally, I love the movie. I don't think it's a good adaptation of the comics, but as a standalone action horror film, I actually think it's really good. But in 2013, the comics were adapted into the NBC series Constantine, which I haven't seen any episodes of that, but I'm told it's a lot more true to the comics than the Keanu Reeves version is. Interestingly enough, the voice of Constantine in this movie is actually played by Matt Ryan, who played Constantine on the TV show. Now, I'm reviewing this movie as part of my series of Batman reviews, because Batman actually does have a pretty big part to play in this movie. Now, I could be wrong on this, but I don't believe Batman is really part of the Justice League Dark team in the comics. I kind of have a feeling that when they made this movie, they just added Batman in there for marquee value, because while characters like John Constantine and Santana and Swamp Thing certainly have followings, they're not as marketable as Batman is, so I do have kind of a feeling that Batman's really only in this movie for marquee value. At the same time, though, he does play a pretty important role in this story. Now, the plot of Justice League Dark is a series of grisly murders start happening all over the world, and the people committing these murders are seeing monsters and demons, and the Justice League believes that these murders might be supernatural in nature, and the Justice League has dealt with magic before, and Superman even points out that Shazam is magical in nature, and they don't mention it in the movie, but even Wonder Woman is magical. So magic does exist in this universe, and the Justice League is well aware of the existence of magic, but Batman is hesitant to believe that these murders have a supernatural basis because he's dealt with the criminally insane way more than probably any of the other members of the Justice League, so he's still hesitant to believe that there's anything supernatural going on. That is until he receives a message from Deadman, who is the ghost of a murdered trapeze artist, who tells him to contact paranormal investigator John Constantine. So Batman eventually gets in contact with Santana, who is a magician and a former lover of Constantine's, and Batman, Santana, and Deadman eventually team up up with John Constantine, and eventually they also team up with Edrican the Demon, or Jason Blood, and now they're all trying to figure out what's going on, and eventually they find out that the reason people are having these visions of demons is it has something to do with an evil sorcerer who was defeated in the Middle Ages, but now he's trying to bring himself back from hell, and if he comes back from hell, it will be the end of the world as we know it. So now Batman, Constantine, Santana, Deadman, and Edrican the Demon have to stop this. Now, I enjoyed Justice League Dark. Now, as I said before, I've only read a little bit of the Constantine comics, and I haven't read any of the official Justice League Dark comics, so I really don't know how true this movie is to the comic books. Like, as I said before, I'm pretty sure Batman is not really a big part of the Justice League Dark comic books. I have a feeling he was just kind of added in this movie for marketing purposes. That being said, however, as a big Batman fan, I did appreciate seeing him in this movie. And it was a lot of fun seeing Batman interacting with these supernatural characters and seeing him go up against these supernatural forces, especially because Batman is a regular human who just has access to really advanced technology, and it was really interesting seeing Batman use the technology against these supernatural forces, whereas the other characters in the movie are using magic against these supernatural forces. I also feel like Batman in this movie, in a lot of ways, is showing sort of an outsider's perspective because he's a regular human and he's getting caught up in this world of the supernatural, which he really is not a part of. There also is a really badass moment with Batman where there's a certain point where they encounter these demons who are the same types of demons that take damned souls to hell, and they say, "This one has cheated us many times before," which I thought was really interesting. So, like, are they trying to imply that Batman's going to go to hell when he dies? And Batman, he can't actually see these demons, but he knows they're up in his face, and he just says, "Boo," to them, which I thought was really badass. It shows that even though these are demons we're dealing with, he's not even remotely intimidated. Now, Swamp Thing is in this movie, but his role in this film is very minimal. Now, I'll admit, I've never read any of the Swamp Thing comic books, but I know that the Swamp Thing in this movie is definitely based on Alan Moore's version of Swamp Thing. Now, I can see somebody who's maybe a big Swamp Thing fan being somewhat disappointed by the fact that Swamp Thing has such a small part to play in this movie. But as somebody who hasn't read the Swamp Thing comic books, it really didn't bother me, but I could see that being a problem for other people. Now, in this movie, I really want to say that Batman, John Constantine, and Santana are the three main protagonists of the film, and the movie really does focus a lot on Constantine and Santana's relationship, and it talks about how they really aren't too different from each other. Like, they both practice magic, but Santana is really afraid to dive into the world of black magic that Constantine is a part of. Now, this movie is rated R, but truth be told, I really don't think it needs the R rating, and I have a feeling that DC just asked for this movie to be rated R to appeal more towards adults, but really, truth be told, I feel like this should have just been a PG-13, because I could see a mature 13-year-old being able to handle some of the stuff in this movie. Like, yes, there is a lot of violence and blood in the movie, but it's definitely cartoon blood. There is some sexual tension between Constantine and Santana, but it's nothing that gets into R-rated territory. And there is definitely a lot of cursing in the movie, but it's nothing that a 13-year-old hasn't heard before, so truth be told, I really don't think this needed an R rating. This should have just been like a hard PG-13. That being said, I certainly won't recommend this for kids because there is some pretty dark subject matter in this movie, especially in the scenes where people are having hallucinations of demons and monsters. Some of the demons are actually really freaking terrifying looking. There's also a scene towards the beginning where this guy is holding his family hostage, and it is a really intense scene, but I don't know if it's a scene that really warrants an R rating. There's also a really disturbing scene in the movie where this girl is about to throw her baby off a church because she thinks her baby is the devil, and Batman tries to stop her. So once again, there are some creepy scenes in the movie, and there is some dark subject matter, but once again, I feel like it should have just been a hard PG-13. I don't think it really needed to be an R. But yeah, I did enjoy Justice League Dark, and I would definitely recommend this if you haven't seen it yet. Now, there is talks of them doing a live-action Justice League Dark movie, which is going to take place in the DC Extended Universe, so it's going to be in the same universe as Man of Steel, Batman vs. Superman, Suicide Squad, Wonder Woman, and Justice League. And honestly, I hope it's good, but the issue with that series, though, is that series has been very hit or miss. And also, I know Guillermo del Toro originally wanted to do this Justice League Dark movie, but he then left the project due to creative differences, which that's one way I think DC shot themselves in the foot, because I think Guillermo del Toro is one of the best fantasy directors out there, and I think that's a major loss losing Guillermo del Toro. So I really have no idea how this live-action Justice League Dark movie is going to be. But yeah, that was my review on Justice League Dark, and bye.